Yeah? All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Berkeley Haas. How's everybody doing? Yeah. Well, we've delivered our signature weather for you, for those of you that have traveled from out of town. We are known for our hospitality here in Berkeley. This is the epicenter of the farm-to-table movement. I don't know if you knew that, but just a little while down the road, some of the innovators who really transformed the way we think about food and supply chains and culture all sort of vibrate around here. My name's Will Rosenzweig. I'm a member of the professional faculty, have been here since 1999. I was the first person to teach social entrepreneurship at this august school. And about 12 years ago, 15 now, one of our MBA students asked me if I'd be willing to teach a social entrepreneurship course just focused on food. And as background, I do have a background in food and entrepreneurship. I founded a company called the Republic of Tea in 1990, which I'm sure is well before many of you were born. And I've done a lot of things in both as an entrepreneur and in the investment field in food, health, well-being area. But anyway, the student went to the dean here at Berkeley, and they've always been pretty receptive to student-initiated courses. So the dean said, well, if you can get the minimum number of students to come to the class, we'll run it. And so this student organized. She was very entrepreneurial. She now runs a very successful cannabis gummies business. And I think she had the idea in the course that I taught. But anyway, more than 60 people signed up for that class. And that was a signal that there was really something happening here at Berkeley, that there was really a coalescence of both vision, values, and intent to get involved in food. So over that last 15 years, we've really developed an amazing community of practice that includes a lot of student activities. We have the largest club on the entire Berkeley campus is called Food at Haas. Some of the leaders of that, Isabella and Venetia and Ava, just wave for a minute, give them a big round of applause. They had a lot to do with organizing this session and this topic. So they have a very active group that's both academically rigorous, but also a lot of fun. And they do a lot of culinary adventures and sort of social-facing adventures. And our work here in the Sustainable Food Initiative at Berkeley Haas has a definite social conscience and bent. And we are focused on food systems innovation. And that's what today's panel is really about. I'm so happy to have three of my favorite change makers here to speak with you, all of who have been doing remarkable things since their advance from the university. And they've all made their way with very non-conventional careers. So I thought that would be interesting to you because, to be honest, most of the jobs of the future in food and agriculture and systems change, they don't exist yet. So if you're looking to go work for a big corporation, you're probably walking into the past. And, you know, with AI, it said that 80% of all jobs will change 80% in the coming years. So I wanted to invite these people specifically because they've been so intentional about thinking about how to shape their career paths, which I'm sure is on your minds as well. So I'm going to let them each introduce themselves, tell you just a little bit quickly kind of who they are and what they're doing right now, and then we'll migrate into kind of how they get here so you can learn a little bit about that. Then we'll move into a conversation more about systems change in the food system and how they're thinking about it, what their theories of change are, how they're organizing their modalities to advance that. And then we'll have some questions and dialogue. And we've got a little under an hour. So, and if you want to ask a question, you are you are requested to use this funny WOVA app that scraped all of your LinkedIn information. Is that owned by LinkedIn, that app? I was surprised that they had access to all that information. But in any case, you can send that. I can call it up here, and I'll moderate the questions. So without further ado, Amanda, Samantha, and Charity, let's have a warm welcome for them.
Thank you, Will. How's the mic? Good. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Amanda Eller. I am with an organization called the Waverly Street Foundation, where I lead our work on U.S. food systems. Waverly Street Foundation is a climate-focused philanthropic foundation based here in the Bay Area. And our North Star for our work is that we're focused on climate solutions that simultaneously have benefits for communities in improving their lives on the dimensions they care most about. And so through that lens, we work on two systems, which are energy systems and food systems. And we do that work globally in 6 countries around the world. And one other thing about us is that we're a spend down foundation, which is kind of unique in the philanthropic space, looking to spend out all of our assets in about 10 years. And then within the U.S. food systems work, my portfolio focuses on both the supply side and the demand side. So we're thinking and working with farmers on the solutions farmers need to make changes on their farm that will reduce emissions, but also thinking about the demand side drivers that are needed to generate demand for regeneratively grown food. So that's me.
Thank you, Amanda. Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Derrick. I am the founder and executive director of the Plant Futures Initiative. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was actually born out of UC Berkeley when I was a student here a few years ago. And our mission is to accelerate the transition to a plant-centered food system. And we do that by working primarily with students and universities across the US and Latin America. We have a chapter network of 85 universities across the US and Mexico, where we are really activating the plant-based food communities. We're providing students with education. The core of what we do is curriculum and career support, connecting students to jobs and helping them create career pathways for students wanting to work in the plant-based food sector. And we really see plant-based diets and the shift towards a plant-centered food system as one of the strongest levers we have for climate action. So really excited to be here and excited to share more. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charity May, and I am the principal and founder of Sacred Futures, which is an advisory and innovation practice that I started a few years ago. My work primarily has been at the intersection of organizational design, capital innovation, and regenerative business models. So thinking, helping founders, investors, fund managers reimagine the systems that we are operating in. And the lens through which this work that I focus this work in is primarily looking at our earth and the sustenance that comes from our earth, which is our food, our fibers, forestry, everything that is alive, that is providing for us as humans, and really focus on the healing modalities of how can we reimagine how capital flows, how can we reimagine how our organizations operate in such a way that actually heals and repairs human connection with the living world more broadly. And yeah, my background is in the investment world, so bringing that specifically to food systems, farmers, entrepreneurs, and ecosystem partners, so intermediaries that are grappling with these larger questions to try to figure out what systems change they can bring.
You hold on to the mic. So since we've got a student audience, I thought it'd just be interesting if each of you shared a little bit about what you studied and then maybe where that led you and what professional experiences you had that were kind of seminal to where you've arrived today. So
happy to start that off. So I went to school at Case Western Reserve University, which is what is it? It's a college. Sorry about that. In Ohio. That's where I'm originally from. And I studied management, finance, economics, but I also dabbled, I want to say dabble because I got 2 degrees, international relations, but also dabbled in psychology, and I mentioned economics as well. And so my journey in terms of where I was, the trajectory that I was taking, I didn't actually have a specific role that I was trying to pursue. And I was very much interested and very grateful to the faculty that I had at the time that saw that I was interested in developing the skills necessary, and figuring out a journey along the way. Like I said, at the time, I didn't really know if there was a specific job that would cater to where I wanted to go, but I wanted to be a part of deep impact and change. And so at that time, the term impact investing was like not really a term, but people were trying to figure out corporate social responsibility. There were a couple of ETFs that were just starting to talk about what does it look like to maybe divest and or shift investments towards more social good. What does that look like more broadly? But it was very nascent at the time, and that was the interest that I had when stepping out of college, and my first job was in investment banking. Actually, not directly related or focused on impact investing at the time, but my time in the capital markets world again was more focused on developing the skill set. And so in that space, I was exposed to the energy sector, so traditional utilities and power, but also renewable energy. And then I transitioned into leveraged finance, where I developed the skills around portfolio management, monitoring, underwriting large leveraged finance transactions, where private equity sponsors were buying and selling companies, and so supporting the efforts to finance all those pieces. All the while, my soul was being crushed in a way. Not because the organization I was working with at the time, people were absolutely amazing, but I was really struggling with the fact that the system was allowing and enabling, like, there's enough money. There is enough money out there. It's not a problem with the money, but how that money was flowing, where it was cycling to, who gets to make the decisions related to that money. Those were the questions that were really challenging me to ask, but like the why and the how. And so in the heart of hearts, I am a creative and designer. And it took me a little bit of time to figure this out, but realized that as a creative and designer, yes, I like to make things with my hands that are like beautiful, but also in systems change, it is design. We are taking an idea that maybe doesn't exist, or taking an existing idea and like deconstructing it and figuring out, is there another way in which this idea can, is there another way in which this idea can actually align with purpose and values? And so I could go on and on about that, but through private equity, private financial sponsors, I transitioned into real estate investment and development when I moved out here to California. And that intersection was getting closer to that impact investing space. So we were focused on social purpose real estate. But again, learning the real estate land development component was another set of skill sets. And alongside that, my interest in ecology and land stewardship led me to study permaculture design and really just dance and play around with looking at nature as a model for how we might reimagine how our systems work and thrive. And I also like to dance. So believe it or not, movement is very much a motivating factor in the work that I do.
Thank you so much. So my food systems transformation journey started way before I went to university. I actually had a pretty life-changing moment when I was 12 years old, and I really think that's the day my journey started. I learned about industrial factory farming, and I was absolutely devastated. I'm sure some of you have seen the videos. I was horrified, and I couldn't believe it, and I remember going to my parents crying in tears, telling them this can't be real, this can't be what's happening in the food system, and I was sure there was a better way to eat that was better for the planet, for our health, and for animals. So that's really where my journey began. I started learning about plant-based diets and the incredible benefits they had for all of these issues and that we were seeing in the food system. And that night, I remember telling my parents that I would never eat animals again or their byproducts, and I never did. And that's really where my journey began, and I became so invested in plant-based diets, learning the documentaries, the books, trying to educate myself on how to eat in a way that, especially at the time, was not very easy in Florida where I grew up. It was not a very accepted way of eating. So I really had to kind of find my own way to do it. I had support from my family, from my friends. I was very fortunate in that way. But that eventually led me down to choosing a university. And Berkeley seemed the obvious choice for a lot of reasons. One of the food capitals of the world. I was super excited when I got into Berkeley for undergrad, really wanting to zone in on food systems. And there really wasn't a food systems program at the time. The closest I could get into it in undergrad was environmental economics and policy. So that's what I ended up studying. And even within that program, there were very few food systems courses. So I did what I could, but there wasn't really a way for me to build a career path, or at least that's how I felt at the time. So I graduated and I wanted to do something in the environmental field. I would have loved a food systems job. I couldn't find one, so I ended up working in clean energy, in clean tech for a few years, which I really enjoyed, but I knew deep down where I needed to be. I knew I wanted to work in plant-based food, and that brought me back to going back to grad school. I said, well, I need to shift my skill set. I want to learn more about food. How would I build skill sets to work in food systems? So I ended up going back to Berkeley to get my master's of public health, which to me was the very obvious place where all of these issues would intersect. Health, climate, treatment of animals, how this is all tied into these huge public health issues. And once again, I was stuck. I got to the public health program. Nobody was talking about plant-based diets. There wasn't really any education in my courses about it. And I was pretty shocked, and I was disappointed because I was questioning whether I should have gone back to grad school or not. And I wanted a job in the plant-based food sector. And similarly, there wasn't really career support at the university for food systems jobs. And then I met Will, who was my professor at the time. I was taking Will's course on social entrepreneurship. And I remember expressing that frustration to Will in my class. And Will encouraged me, well, why don't you start something at the university? Why don't you take that passion and build something for students? Because we need this at the university. So I took it on as a personal challenge, not thinking it would ever actually become what it is today, but ended up designing a curriculum, the Plant Futures course, which is now offered at UC Berkeley and across the whole University of California system, which introduces students to plant-based food systems, prepares them for jobs in the field. I was very fortunate to meet my co-founders along the way, students who were excited about it. We designed with the support of Will and launched a course at Berkeley at Haas. Actually, this is where it was originally launched on plant-based food. And we had more students sign up than we ever would have imagined. I remember my co-founder and I wondering if even 5 students were going to sign up for this class. We weren't sure if we were the only ones who cared about this. And I remember we had to cap the course. It was during COVID, so it was all virtual. We had to cap it at 500 students because we weren't sure how to manage that many students on Zoom. And that to us, I think, was a signal that we were onto something even beyond UC Berkeley, because we had students emailing us from different universities wanting to audit Plant Futures and really excited. So we started realizing, well, this is an issue not just at Berkeley, but they're not really talking about plant-based food at other campuses. And that was really where it evolved from an academic course, into a 501c3. We ended up launching a nonprofit, the Plant Futures Initiative, so that we could make this program and course and career support available for students all over the world. And that's what we're doing today. And we did not think we would be at 85 universities at this stage. We have a student chapter network that's very rapidly growing, and a curriculum offered across the country as well that we're going to continue expanding. And it's just been really, really exciting to see. And one of the primary reasons that students are actually interested and motivated to join Plant Futures is for climate, which is one reason I'm really excited that this topic is here today, because in the climate space, I'm not seeing a lot of discussion around food systems, but I think the needle is starting to move in that direction. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Sam. I always love hearing your story. So my educational background, I studied in undergrad international relations and focused on international development. And so I left the country when I graduated, and it was through that time I was working with smallholder farmers in Benin, in West Africa, and in Nepal, and really coming from an economic development perspective. I wasn't necessarily thinking about climate or the environment as like a primary driver or issue area that I was interested in at that stage. The world was also a little bit different then. But through that experience and working with farmers and seeing, there was one in particular, I helped start a solar company, and we were doing solar-powered irrigation, solar-powered water pumps for farmers, and it was going really well. And we were starting to scale up the business, and I was writing all these business plans and pitching investors about all the hundreds of thousands of water pumps we would be selling. And then realizing that these farmers are practicing flood irrigation in a region with a sensitive water table. We were tripling their income. They were tripling their income with these water pumps because they could grow year round. So it was amazing from a livelihoods perspective. But what happens when the water table runs out? And so these questions about how do we balance livelihoods with natural resources just really captivated me, as well as this experience of fundraising and just seeing how challenging it is to attract capital at scale to the problems of poverty, inequality, and of climate change, where frankly, like most of the solutions that we need are not super profitable to solve. And we still need a lot of money to go into them. And so those kind of two motivating areas are what led me to apply to business school. And I came here to Haas with kind of that interest. Met Will while I was here. I did a lot of soul searching, thinking about where I wanted to focus, and really felt like I was at home with this food systems work, even though it's not it's such an intersectional space that when you think about what is a food systems job, it can show up in so many different places and industries. So it's often not a straightforward or clear-cut path, but I felt like that was where I really wanted to be and spend my time. And so coming out of Haas, I joined an ag tech company, which led me to spend several years driving around the rural Midwest, meeting with farmers, really seeing what our current kind of conventional big ag system looks like, why farmers do what they do, all of the different incentives that lead them to make the decisions that they make. And then about 5 years ago, I moved into this role in philanthropy, which has been a really a great fit for me in being able to think big picture about the systems, have that bird's eye view, and have a lot of tools at my disposal that include investing, but also include a lot of levers for change that are not about profit seeking, but really about thinking about root causes and policy change and some of the other levers that we have.
Wonderful. So, in the pedagogy of entrepreneurship, we think about mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets. So if you think about what you just heard from Charity, Samantha, and Amanda, it's interesting because they each bring a mindset of purpose, really, and kind of transformational responsibility. I think that's something that they share. On the road to getting to where they are now, they each took on responsibilities and roles and experiences that help them build skill sets. And I think the interesting thing for all of you to reflect on, I'm always in office hours with students about, should I go do a startup now, or should I join a big company, or, what should I do when I graduate? And, I think it's just interesting for you to tune into the pattern recognition of our panelists today, because I think it starts with a mindset, then you develop skills through experiences that might be relevant. Also, the cross-disciplinary perspective, if you're going to be in food, is absolutely essential. And one of the things that is really hard about this, and especially in business schools, is that there's no class that is more boring than 60 MBA students. I mean, no offense. But the way the universities are organized is they're pretty siloed. And it's, as much as you'd think like the collegial atmosphere of a university is very collaborative, it's not. And people are deep in their own tunnel of research. And so one of the things I would encourage you to do is figure out how to break out of those silos, how to change those silos. I've worked really hard to make the classes that I guide be cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary, so that they've got business school students and public health students and public policy students and architects and urban design students and economists and computer scientists. And you have to work hard around here to actually materialize that. But I just encourage all of you to go where there's a convergence of ideas, practices, values, cultures. When I first started teaching social entrepreneurship, here, I had a lot of public health students in with a lot of business students, and the public health students brought this bias that the business students were creating all the problems in the world, and it was their job to clean it up afterward. And so there's a lot of work especially in food systems work, to kind of reconcile that. And if you're going to be, a leader in this field, I just really encourage you to question the status quo and think a little bit differently about your path. I hope that you'll have the kind of the courage, like our panelists have, to go say, gee, I don't have to do exactly what's prescribed for me. I need to go over there and get some different experience. So maybe we'll shift now just into about systems change, because I think that's really why we're here. And Amanda, why don't you start? Maybe you could share a little bit about how the foundation thinks about systems change, and you've got so many choices about where you could deploy capital and support, but how do you think about that in a strategic and holistic manner?
Yeah, it's a great question, Will. So when I think about systems change, I think two things. One is it's about peeling back to the root causes and thinking about how do we not just sort of treat the symptoms, but really get at those root causes. And then about intersectionality. And I feel like within the food system, this is maybe more important than, I guess I'm biased because I work on food, than in any other system. I'm sure that's not true, but it sometimes feels that way because of how closely interlinked things are. And what I mean by that is if you try to only focus on one piece of the system, you can not only miss the opportunity to pursue a solution that could have much broader set of benefits and solve other problems at the same time, but you can actually cause harm with other things. One thing where this comes up a lot in my work and where it's really influenced my strategy is when we think about generating demand for regeneratively grown food. And how do we do that? And one of the conversations that comes up a lot is around the cost of food. And is food actually cheaper than it should be because we're subsidizing it through all of these ways, and we're not accounting for the externalities, et cetera. And the truth of the matter is that food is both cheaper than it should be, and it's too expensive for a lot of people. Like, both things are true at the same time. And so if we pursue solutions that drive up the cost of food, we're causing all kinds of problems for ourselves, hurting a lot of people, and probably going to cause a backlash and set things back in the long term. And so how do you solve for both of those things at once? And one of the areas that I'm really excited about that's a systems change solution is institutional procurement and food as medicine, and thinking about how do we actually use public sector procurement to pursue procurement that is guided by and aligned with values, so that when we're generating demand for regeneratively grown food, it's not about a really expensive CPG product in Whole Foods, which is great, and we need those too. But if it's only that, then we've missed the opportunity to connect the vast majority of people to really healthy, nutrient-dense food that when we're talking about school cafeterias and hospitals and university campuses and prisons, we're talking about a much broader set of people that then also get that access while driving those environmental changes that we want to see. What about you, Sam?
Thank you, Amanda. Well, building off of the university point, I think for our work at Plant Futures, we think of systems. How do we transform the institutions that influence the way we think, the way we learn, the career pathways that we build, and even influence culture? And to me, universities are those like very fertile grounds of culture change, of where, your career pathways start for a lot of people, where you're starting to learn, outside of your parents' home, starting to develop eating habits outside of your parents' home for the first time. So it's a very, I think, fertile ground for systems change, and somewhere that I think is one of our main intervention points for Plant Futures, for a few different reasons, starting with the education piece and my own experience, we saw that, even beyond UC Berkeley, we did this whole landscape assessment, and we're talking to universities and students across the world and realized that there was so little education, not only on plant-based diets, but food systems courses in general. There were either, a small certificate program on the side or maybe a couple classes here and there that you could build into your minor program. But the fact that there's so few even majors structured around food systems change just shows how little is invested at the university level for students wanting to work in food systems. So we fill in that gap through our curriculum at Plant Futures, but that's the first piece, right? Starting to learn about it. But then it's how do you take what you're learning and carry it with you for the rest of your life through your values, through your job? And that career pathway is so critical coming out of universities. And if we aren't preparing students for food systems jobs, we are losing talent and passion that we need to transform food systems. We need students from all academic backgrounds and disciplines doing this work. And if we aren't preparing students, which we're not, even in my own public health program, there was very little support for food systems jobs. We are missing out on the very, very critical talent that we need at such a critical time in the world when we need more and more people doing this work. And then finally, the culture change piece of it as well, starting with the food that we're eating at the university level. If we're going in the dining halls and there isn't a lot of plant-based food options available, you're choosing what's available to you. And you're also, those habits you're forming at that time you're going to carry those with you for the rest of your life, most likely. It's a very influential point in your life. So if we're not serving, making plant-based food more accessible at the university level, showing students how you can eat more plant-based food integrated into your diet, that's another very critical leverage point. So we focus on that through our work as well. And that's how we, at least through my organization, think about systems change, is starting at the university, education, career pathways, eating habits, which ultimately transfers into culture change and shifting the way that we think about plant-based food, normalizing plant-based food on campuses and making it more accessible and not making it a me versus you, or you're vegan or you're not. This is the way that we should all be eating and shifting towards, whether you're vegan or not. It's making one step in that direction makes a difference.
Sam, maybe before you go on, could you say, maybe for those of you that are just here because you're curious about food systems and you don't understand that food is the single biggest factor or leverage point, really, it's the low-hanging fruit to address climate change. Maybe, Sam, you could talk just for a little bit about the magnitude of the food system's impact on climate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure. The data is actually hard to keep up with. It's a magnitude that I don't have the most recent numbers on the top of my head, but it surpasses transportation, energy, all of these other sectors. Something as simple as one meal that we choose in a day, choosing a burger, coming from an animal compared to a plant-based burger, surpasses how much water you could be saving from shorter showers or maybe a flight across the country. It's insane if you look at the numbers, and there's far, far, far more room for impact in our day-to-day diets and choices than there is in other areas of our life that we think we might be making an impact, and it absolutely all matters. I think it all matters, and it's good to be conscious of that, but that's something I think that always surprises students, is that we're not talking about the dietary impact on climate, on our day-to-day choices, our grocery. When we go grocery shopping, when we go to a restaurant, there is so much potential. Even swapping one meal a week for a plant-based option is more impactful than a year of, driving how many hours. The data is pretty shocking if you look at it. So that's something we teach our students, is a climate aspect. We have a whole climate change module in our curriculum, and that's the primary reason students, as I had mentioned earlier, are drawn to our program for the climate aspect, because that's something that's very often overlooked in climate. And I don't know if you all noticed, but there was actually plant-based food default at lunch today, which is pretty incredible. And that's how all climate conferences should be. I'm shocked at how many climate conferences I go and they're serving animals for lunch. There's a disconnect. And I think the needle is starting to move. You're not taking away a person's choice or a consumer's choice. As you saw, you can still opt in for the meat if you'd like, but the default should not be meat. In this day and age, with what we know about food and climate, that should not be the default. So I'm really, really excited to see Berkeley and this conference setting the precedent for other conferences.
Yeah.
Could I just add a couple stats?
Yeah,
Because
please.
I also
And mention Drawdown, too.
Yeah. Actually, Project Drawdown is a great, if you're not familiar with it, they do a catalog of climate solutions and rank them by kind of the magnitude of their potential to address the problem. Plant-based diets, I think, is the second biggest potential change lever. So it's something that we think a lot about and work a lot on. So globally, food systems accounts for between a quarter and a third of all emissions. It sort of depends on where you count certain things. But just to give some specific examples, here in the state of California, about 70% of our agriculture emissions are from livestock, which is almost entirely from dairy. And that actually doesn't account for emissions from land that's used to cultivate feed for livestock. That's just directly from the animals themselves. And so I think it's a really important point because within the climate and food system space, I think there's still not actually enough conversation about the role of animal agriculture. It's hard to talk about. It's just hard to talk about. And I so appreciate the work that Plant Futures is doing to think about how do we build community around this and have conversations about it, because it is hard to talk about. But if we don't actually address that piece of it, you kind of miss the where the emissions really are.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. So many really good points that are being raised here. And I'm going to try to stick with your question, but I might veer off for a little bit. Well, I hope that's okay. Maybe just because it's fresh in this conversation, I do want to name one of the lenses through which Sacred Futures is focused on systems change. And it really is looking at who is closest to stewarding the earth. And it's those who are in relationship with the land, those who are putting the seeds into the soil or whatever the growing medium is. And if you have, I'm going to say this to the students, the entrepreneurs, if you have a food related idea, do not pursue it until you are experienced sitting at the foot of a farmer who's growing one of the components that is going to be a part of the supply network for that food. It's really the work with Sacred Futures at the higher level of systems change and working with the organizations that are acting as intermediaries and bringing resources to specifically farmers that are here in the United States. And that is across the spectrum. That is vegetable producers, that is fisheries, that is those who are integrating livestock through a regenerative manner. The approach and focus related to that is they are, especially here in the United States, are in dire need of support and in dire need of resources, and resources of all different shapes and size. And venture capital is not going to write $50 million check to ensure that the next generation of farmers have access to land. We need different creative sources of financial capital, specifically to address those particular challenges and problems. But also the other lens from the farmer's perspective is looking at, I said it already, but looking at how are they in relationship with the earth and with the land? Is it a modality of stewardship and care? Are they thinking creatively about we use the word intersection, but the interconnectedness of everything? And that's, I want to name that it's really, I would say, my worldview that is driving Sacred Futures and the work that I'm pursuing towards system change. And it's three components. One is that everything is alive. There's energy flow between relationships. The earth is alive. The second one being everything is connected. You cannot separate. Well, we're all breathing the same air, by the way, if you didn't know that. Everything truly is connected, and food systems really illuminates that in so many different ways. We heard it already about the health and wellness of our bodies. I think of one of the ways that I came into this work and feeling really passionate about our earth as our sustenance is because Mother Earth has taken care of me, has taken care of my family with food being the source of medicine. But when I also reflect on my personal experience of stepping onto organic land, food forests, and touching the soil, I think of my physiological and emotional and mental well-being. One of my most favorite places is actually being in an agricultural environment where, all your senses can be interacted, and so that's why I think it's a really important lived experience to ensure that you understand all of the intricacies and all of the challenges specifically that our farmers are facing to provide the food that we're seeing being served here today, and going beyond just very specific types of vegetable produce. I'm thinking, for example, controlled agricultural environments have a role to play. But if you've been following that technology and following what has been transpiring in the venture capital space, you'll see that there were billion-dollar checks that were written for a lot of these companies, and over the last few years, you've also seen there's been some challenges, scaling too fast, too far, making some assumptions about where and how our food can be produced. I'll just say it, I don't think there's a scenario where we are not farming without land. I think us as humans, we need to be in relationship with land. There's a role, like as I mentioned, there's a role for controlled agricultural environments, but is it at the scale in which we're seeing? And is the technology actually developing to a place where it can, produce the nutrient-dense foods that we need and not just leafy greens or strawberries? So when we talk about systems change, it is that zooming out, but also staying deeply connected and grounded. We haven't mentioned the word soil, but soil has such a critical role to play in the conversation of food systems, and how do we ensure that the food that we're eating is deeply nutrient dense? We have to understand what is the soil organic matter, that mix and that construct, and what are the different inputs that are coming through to create that rich and lively soil organic matter. I could go a lot of different places.
I'm going to jump in. Did anybody read the story about the company named Sensei in the Wall Street Journal the other day? So Sensei was I think the reporter called it the folly of Larry Ellison, who's the fourth wealthiest man in the world, and bought the island of Lanai in Hawaii, or most of it. And he, I think I have a mic here. Yeah, I think it's okay. And anyway, the article basically talked about the $500 million that he invested to try to grow food in a new way on Lanai. So he moved from, he's the guy that started Oracle Corporation. My favorite line in the article was, most of the executives in the company had no experience in agriculture. So just to Charity's point about just because you have money and you've been successful in another field is not a roadmap for instant success. Food innovation, it's harder than almost any other field, because not only does it have a science dimension to it, obviously, and a cultural practice to it, but everybody's an expert and everybody has an opinion about it. So just to prepare you for that. Maybe just quickly, I'd be really interested. What's something that you're really excited about right now, that you're working on? You just told me a great story, Samantha. You've been visiting different chapters, and in Charity, you've been working with some really interesting groups. So it might be fun just to have people get a little visibility into something that has kind of got you encouraged in this moment of where that can be lacking. So. You want to share it?
I'm happy to start there.
Yeah.
I'll do it super quickly. So in the capital innovation space, I've really been privileged to be working, to have worked with the design and launch of a new integrated capital fund that is specifically focused in supporting farmers of color in the United States. And the name of the firm is Pot Liquor Capital. And so from the investment thesis to the investment process, to the wraparound services that need to be identified for the farmers themselves. Amanda mentioned the term livelihood. These are, first and foremost, is identifying, farmers, ranchers, what have you. There are people that are running businesses. Like, these are businesses, and businesses do require capital. So starting from that place of honoring and respecting that these are enterprises that are really important to their local community, to their local food shed, to their local food system, and being really creative about the type of capital and how it flows. So had the honor to be a founding investment committee member, so being a part of those decisions and ensuring that the capital is getting there, but also being really creative about the different types of financial products that are being provided to meet the need, to meet the specific need for those farmers. Also quickly state another project that spun out of that was part of Sacred Futures' work is supporting the design and development of an organization as it starts and launches. So there were 13 member farmer-led organizations that were supporting their local ecosystems that came together, and they were asking the question, how do we organize to pool our resources and our relationships to provide equipment for the farmers that we're in relationship with? And these original 13-member organizations, they have access to over 700 farmers, 40,000 acres. That's 15% of what Bill Gates owns, by the way. You do the math. But being able to influence and impact the way in which these farmers are grappling with some serious challenges, whether that's related to labor or having lack of access to technology, as well, to be able to make transitions from conventional agriculture to regenerative agriculture. Equipment is a really big component of that. And so I have this living charter experience or journey that these member organizations went through to define how they would move together to make that impact. The name of the organization is BIPOC National Empowerment Trust. Very early stages of this initiative and work, but will be incredibly impactful across the country, 17 states. And I'm very, very proud to be in relationship with them.
I think one of the things I'm most excited about is who we're reaching and the students that we're reaching and the diversity of campuses in our network. We've recently recruited chapters in Florida, in Mississippi, Vanderbilt University. One of our Florida chapter members or founders is actually on the football team. So spaces where you don't necessarily think students would be thinking about plant-based eating or interested in it, we're able to reach those spaces. That's something that's been really exciting for us to see. And of all of those areas, the area I'm actually most excited about right now is Mexico. That's where I live right now, in Mexico City. And Mexico is really having a moment, I think, right now in food and climate. You all might know they just elected their first woman president, climate scientists. They're doing federal work on bringing more healthy food to schools. So it's really incredible. The plant-based movement there, I think Mexico is a plant-based capital of the world. I have never seen a concentration of plant-based restaurants, cafes. In my neighborhood, there are 3 all plant-based grocery stores. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, and it's truly such an incredible moment when you see where they stand politically compared to the rest of the world. I think there's so much potential for impact in Mexico. They're a leader for Latin America. I think we're building a model of Plant Futures in Mexico that can be scaled across Latin America, and that's personally the work I'm excited for. I'm biased. I live there right now. But I think also challenging this misconception that veganism is for white elitist communities. I think a lot of people think that way. And coming from a Mexican-American background, the mom who's a Mexican immigrant, she was eating plant-based when she grew up, the farm she grew up in Mexico. I mean, far before she ever got to the U.S. Beans, maize, tortillas, avocado, fruits and veggies. I think, most countries or most places in the world were eating this way for a long, long time before it became more mainstream. So that's something that we also teach our students, the history of it. Its ties to our culture, to the land, to the soil, and that's something I'm so excited to see. And I actually got to connect to Amanda down in Mexico as well because they're doing work there as well. So pass it to you.
And remind me to tell you about the food I had in the Yucatan. Well, I really appreciate this question because this is a really hard time to be doing climate work. And the last 5.5 weeks, I've had a lot of just difficult conversation after difficult conversation. So it's nice to think about some of the things that I'm excited about and optimistic about. The story I just told Will, so I'll repeat it here, is about one of the organizations in our portfolio. It's an organization called La Cosecha in New Mexico, which is a cooperative. It's a farmer-owned cooperative. There's all farmers of color that are practicing regenerative agriculture, and they cooperatively own this food hub where they distribute to local schools and hospitals. They do amazing and beautiful work. But what is really cool about it, the woman who leads it, Helga Garza, she was concerned that in many parts of New Mexico, and especially rural areas, the only place to buy food is the Dollar General. And you know, if you've been in a Dollar General, there's usually not any fresh food, let alone healthy or local food. And so she'd been trying to get the local Dollar Generals to carry their farmers' produce, and they kept saying no, no, no. So she bought enough shares in the Dollar General to get invited to their shareholder meeting. And when she got to the shareholder meeting, she walked up to the CEO, and when he shook her hand, she would not let go of it. And she said, "You have to come to New Mexico. You have to meet our farmers." And she kept at it. And now the Dollar General is working with them to develop salsas, baby food, and fruit snacks that are made from their farmers' produce. So it's just such a cool, creative example of someone who is so tenacious and seeing a problem and thinking about really creative ways to unstick it.
I just love that story because, you know, the term disruption has become so synonymous with entrepreneurship. And I think in food systems, really, we're not looking to disrupt as much as we're looking to steward. So I think this is a wonderful example of tenacious stewardship of community and systems. I mean, entrepreneurship, actually, the word means to reorder the system of supply. And so that's what you're all doing, and that's inspiring to me. It is a difficult time right now, and I think we'll come back to that, but I wanted to look at some of the questions. One of them that seems to be popular amongst the group here is, in order to transform our food system into something more sustainable, where do we need to channel talent? What are the most critical workforce development needs that you see? Any of you can take that. Not all of you are required to. So, okay.
But at first, I'm going to quiz you all. Okay, how many of you have an interest that intersects finance and food? Okay, so you heard from all of us. There is a need for a really creative, innovative patient capital that's not going to come from venture capital. So my response or answer to that is you don't have to go the same path that I did, but yes, go study, understand finance, the investment world, but stay connected to your heart and to the impact that you want to see in the world, and challenge yourself to expand your understanding of financial capital. So we have an example of philanthropic funding. I've mentioned venture capital. There's a whole range. And so a lot of my work has been looking at integrating and blending different capital sources together. It's hard to do within the legal constructs that exist, but it can be done. And that's where the innovation, that's where the creativity is, thinking about creative financial products. We need a creative insurance product for farmers, getting back to livelihood. So if one of you want to develop that, come talk to me. And as I mentioned, some other examples of just being really creative about how capital moves and gets to those that are doing the stewardship, the work, especially the most vulnerable place, which is the growing of the food. I think the second piece being, if you're interested on the CPG brand side, important again to build relationships with those who are growing food and develop products that are directly creating markets for the regenerative agricultural movement, and where we need to see the way that our food is being grown. I love that. It's a perfect example of how that's taking place. And there are other brands. I'm thinking of Moonshots by Julia Collins, which was just acquired by Patagonia Provisions. Simply, which Sorella Herrera had relationship with Peruvian farmers and developed the brand specifically to connect the market more broadly. So thinking creatively that way is what I would say we need to focus our talent in going towards.
Well, the biggest workforce need I see is maybe not for maybe less well tailored to this particular audience, but technical assistance to farmers. So it's just like one of the sort of critical building blocks when I think about what we need to get to a place where regenerative agriculture can really scale. There's a whole workforce of people who go out to farms and consult with farmers and help them think through like how to solve this problem, how to implement a new practice, how to make changes on their farm. And that's an aging workforce that's too small and just unfortunately has shrunk in the last month. So that's the workforce need that I see as being, it's really like we need more boots on the ground of people who actually know how to do the stuff that we need to do.
But we could mention a collaboration that we're involved with where we've basically taken a business strategy, social entrepreneurship course that we developed here at Haas, and we adopted it for climate smart regenerative farmers to offer them the kind of MBA education that's not normally available to you. This program's called Farmpreneurs, which I'm involved in, and Waverly Street is a fundamental supporter of. So don't think that just because you might not have the agricultural expertise, if you have business strategy expertise, entrepreneurial expertise, you could also be very helpful to some of these farmers.
100%. I got to go to their capstone presentations a few weeks ago, and it was really inspiring and cool to see the different business ideas that these farmers were thinking about in terms of how they're going to scale their businesses, their impact.
Okay, here's a popular question and a tough one in this moment. What role, I can't even ask this question. What role should government play in transforming our food system? Are they doing that today?
I fundamentally believe that we need government support for agriculture. We have a lot of government support for agriculture in this country. Much of it is not serving us. It's not serving our public health, and it's not serving the climate. And if we look at the way the crop insurance system is written, if we look at the way what subsidies are supporting and which types of farmers they're going to, it's really about volume of calories. It's about supporting livestock factory farms, and it's a lot of it is accruing to a very small number of, not even to farmers, but to a very small number of companies that sell them inputs and that buy crops from them on the other side, with farmers kind of stuck in the middle. So it's not working right now. We did just go through a period of the last few years where there was a lot more money flowing from government to good things. But, you know, in policy, we talk about carrots and sticks. So we've had more carrots. Now we're losing those carrots. We still don't have the sticks. Some of those fundamental programs like crop insurance. I think there's just a basic thing, which is just the way the crop insurance works is that for farmers who get federally subsidized insurance, it's about 70 to 80% of the premiums are covered by the taxpayers. And there's no requirement that you practice agriculture in a way that would be resilient to droughts, floods, climate disasters that would then cause insurance to have to pay out. So there's like a fundamental disconnect there that I think if there's like one thing I would do in terms of climate and agriculture from a government perspective, think about how do we bake climate resilience and climate risk mitigation into our federally subsidized crop insurance program.
That was a great answer.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think there's a number of other questions, but our panelists are going to be available, I think, for part of the tea break here. coming up. And I just want to thank them for coming and being with you at ClimateCAP, and thank all of you for joining in this inaugural session here at Berkeley. We begin on time and we end on time.
Right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Will.